We've got a great history to build on, and hopefully that will take us into the next 30 years and hopefully beyond.
I was wine director of the El Gaucho restaurant. We needed an assistant manager and a wine buyer on property at the SeaTac location. Chris came in for one of the interviews, and I thought it was really unique that one of his references was he was a home winemaker.
I first started making wine in the 70s, but strictly on an amateur basis. Back then there was a couple of wineries here in Washington State.
So I asked what kind of references being a home winemaker, and he said, well, when you make wine at home, you become a better wine buyer. And I said, explain that. I loved his explanation about being able to recognize flaws and other things in wine because you understood how it was made. I said, if I hire you for this job, can you teach me how to make wine? I want to be a better buyer. We started making wine at home together. We always had this dream about a winery, but it seemed far-fetched.
Jay and I started a grape brokeraging business to amateurs where we would buy tons from Sagemore and sell it to amateur winemakers.
Joe Marlowe, God bless Joe, sold equipment to amateur winemakers. It was also a wine shop with a contract with Sagemore Farms. He was kind of tired of the whole effort of selling grapes to like 100 or more home winemakers. He said to us, if you want, I will give you this contract I have with Sagemore Farms, and you can take care of all these customers that buy by the pound. You know, just take this thing over for me. We looked at each other and thought that was a cool idea. Maybe we could make a little money, maybe we could get our grapes for free. He arranged it with the people who own Sagemore. We took over the contract, and we ended up selling grapes to about 125 home winemakers. And yes, we got our grapes for free. Then in the 1980s, I joined Rotary International, and met Greg Lill. He was an insurance broker and working with his dad.
See, I met Jay in Rotary. We were both in the Seattle Emerald City Rotary Club.
Everyone says, what do you do? And I said, I'm in the wine business. I sell wine. And Greg was very interested.
I loved wine, and so he was kind of a natural guy to want to get to know being a wine broker.
And long story short, we became really good friends.
We were at our Rotary golf tournament, and Jay invited Chris. Unbeknownst to me, they had made some champagne together and had never gotten to the point where it was disgorged and a cork would go in it and so on. And they were talking about how, gee, what are we going to do with this champagne? I think they had like 100 cases of it. By the end of the golf tournament, they finally said, you know, they were paying money to have it in cold storage. When were they going to be able to, get it disgorged and corked, get labeled, get it to market? And they just thought, let's cut our losses and let's just dump it. And when I heard that, I kind of went, hey, wait a minute, before you're just going to dump out 100 cases of champagne, heck, I'll take it and I'll just put it in the root cellar here at the farm out in Woodinville. And they were like, oh, okay, great.
Which wasn't a chateau back then. It was just a house with 10 acres to it. That was a beautiful piece of property, and he wanted to do something with it because the taxes were high and the upkeep was high.
We were spending a lot of money fixing up the property. And finally, my dad came to me and he said, gee, Greg, we did think of an idea that we could have out at the farm that would generate some income. I started talking to Jay about maybe the idea of a winery. And he said, well, my buddy, Chris, he could be our winemaker.
I think Tom Stockley courted a cork's throw away from San Michel, and it was a perfect place to start a winery.
I started working on a business plan, and it culminated it was around November of '91. We would always we have a place in Maui for Thanksgiving. I brought my business plan, and we get over there. We've been there a few days. My dad says, okay, well, I want to see this idea you have about starting a winery, maybe out at the farm. So I gave him the business plan one afternoon, make sure he had a Mai Tai or a pina colada or something to drink. He's sitting there under the palm tree reading this business plan I put together. My dad goes, I think it's a great idea. I really like it. I think the timing's right. I think it honors our family heritage in France, going back to the town of Lille, back to the 1200s. And he kind of looks at my mom, and my mom kind of goes, well, gee, Charles, it sounds like a great idea. And Greg, if you wrote up the plan, I guess I'm game for it, And then my sister kind of goes, well, if they like it, then I'm in. And then they all look at me and I said, well, okay, I vote no.
Well, Mom and Dad and I, we were all, oh, sounds great. And Gregory intentionally voted against it, just so no one could later say, your idea, so he could always say, well, I didn't vote for it.
Well, this is perfect. I'm outvoted, so we'll do this as a family. And if it doesn't work, I can say I told you not to do it from the very beginning.
So that's literally how it kind of came up on a napkin idea, and persuading Mom and Dad to do it. And they wanted something to do in Dad's retirement, revenue producing, of course.
It was obvious that Jay would be the sales part of it. He's been doing that for a long time.
I started in restaurants as a wine buyer right out of college, and then started a winery PR and marketing and brokerage company.
I was the winemaker of the group.
We all know Chris's background, his passion for wine, his trips to Europe where he learned what good wine was.
And Charles was the friendly banker, and Greg was the finance and business part of it.
We had the winemaking, the marketing, the creativity, and the finances, and boom.
And it just seemed to be a great idea and something that we all wanted to do. And Charles, being European descent, thought that making any alcoholic beverage was a great idea.
Dad, he was so European. His accent was this thick. It was his charm, he was just different. And maybe being different attracts attention.
Obviously, the name of the winery DeLille was using our French ancestral name. And I think Chris and Jay were very amenable to going along with whatever we wanted to do as long as it stayed in a certain context. And so off we went and started talking with David Lake, who was the winemaker and the only master of wine in Washington at the time over at Columbia Winery.
We did know the bridge between home winemaking and commercial winemaking was a big, long bridge. And we had a lot to learn.
Chris was a great guy, but he was an amateur winemaker. He wasn't a professionally trained winemaker yet. And we thought, we better have a little bit of an insurance policy to make sure everything's going well.
So what we did was we hired a consultant. And it was David Lake, a master of wine. God bless David, he's gone now.
At that point, we were young, we were not known, but David, at least you had to be nice to David. He was very important in our industry.
David got us all of the best grapes that he could get us.
He was able to introduce us to all of these great vineyards in eastern Washington on Red Mountain and other parts of the Yakima Valley. And when you kind of walked into a vineyard with David Lake at the time, you kind of got instant credibility and instant respect.
For a young guy to come in and just, say, I want to do this, I did have some experience in the vineyards, but still, it all worked.
We were able to secure the oldest and best wine growing vineyards in the state.
And David was the one that really taught me. He used to tell me, get into the vineyards, stay there, don't come out. And when you do finally come out, go back in. Because he believed that a lot of winemaking is made in the vineyards.
In the very first year, we got both Cabernet and Merlot from Red Willow Vineyard.
That's as big a part of my success as anything else. And DeLille's success is being able to start with some incredible fruit. If I couldn't make good wine out of that, then they should tell me to stay home and get somebody else.
We were talking about, what kind of wine are we going to make, and I was just more of a sponge at this point, just trying to listen and learn what these guys were saying. But Chris wanted to focus on the Bordeaux blend idea, not just Cabernet or not just Merlot, but a blend like they do in Europe.
I wanted to make Bordeaux blends. My background is as much European as it is Californian. I know that some of the greatest wines in the world were Bordeaux blends.
I think both Chris and I cut our teeth on European wines because we're talking about buying wine back in the 70s. It was imports that were, and some California wines as well, but it was mostly imports. And so we were well aware of European style blends.
When you would say to people, Bordeaux blend, a lot of people, if they weren't into wine, didn't even know what you were talking about. So that was really a very targeted focus from the very beginning to do the blend and do it much in the way like they do in Bordeaux, where you bring in all this great wine from these different vineyards and you ferment everything and keep it separate. And you keep it separate for a long time, which is just not the easy way of doing things. It's much harder to keep all these lots separate, even by lot, by barrel type, until you're really ready to do your final blend, which usually takes place a year and a half later. And that's a lot of work.
We thought no one is doing Bordeaux blends in Washington State. We were excited about this idea because that's what Chris and I had been doing at home. We knew they were good. Even as home winemakers, we knew they were really good. There was no stopping us. That's how we felt. That's what we did.
Then your next thing is, well, is it right bank or left bank? The right bank, Pomerol or Saint-Emilion, is all Merlot dominant, and the left bank is all Cabernet dominant.
We weren't sure whether we were going to make Cabernet dominant blends or Merlot dominant blends. So essentially, we bought half Cabernet and half Merlot, and a little bit of Cab Franc.
And what we decided to do is make equal parts of Cabernet and Merlot, and then let our blending trials decide which one we want to make. We got the grapes and we brought them in. We used 100% new French oak to give it its best shot.
And Dad said, I'm not going to do it unless we can do it the best. And so he made sure he had some good relationships and new French oak every year. Forget the cost. If that's what makes the best wine, that's what we'll do.
We were set up to succeed, I think, because of the funding we had and the way we went about doing things. We started off with 1,200 cases the very first year. You know, most of these guys starting off in their garage started with 100 cases or 200 cases or something. We stepped in with 1,200 cases, 100% new French oak, David Lake consulting enologist. Kind of more as a business, not just a couple of people making wine in their garage at home. And I was kind of in charge from my dad to kind of make sure we didn't screw it up. And so that was I was relying a lot on Jay and Chris because they had expertise in their field that I did not have.
We did everything, the four of us, Charles, Greg, Chris, and I. We all had jobs, we all had kids. We would have dinner with our families. We would tuck our kids into bed. We would kiss our wives goodbye, and we'd all meet at the winery around 9 o'clock at night. We would work all night long until 1:32, 3 in the morning.
We'd all take turns, even Charles at the time, we'd all take turns punching down.
I always thought it was great to see Charles up on top of the tanks with our handmade punch down tool. We would go to work the next day on 4 hours sleep at the most and do our jobs.
Hard part was literally washing your hands with bleach sometimes because you had to get all the red stain off your hands before you put on a suit and tie and I'd go to work.
They worked their day jobs and got off, would come here and work. And one night, the three of them literally were punching down and doing crush, and they could see the sun come up.
You just kind of kept going. You just kind of got in a rhythm, and all of a sudden it was starting to get light out outside. We went, oh gosh, it's morning.
And yet they had to quickly run home, get something to eat, shower and shave, dress like a professional, and go to work.
But it was fun. We had a good time, and it really, gave all of us a lot of sweat and blood into the business.
That was a huge hurdle, and they didn't get paid, I believe it was, like 3-4 years. As we were able to get more revenue put together, each of the guys was able to quit the day job and just work here.
We were running on enthusiasm, just totally thrilled and excited that we are embarking on something we really believed in, and we were determined to make a reality.
Then came the blending trials to tell us, what are we going to do?
We discovered that the Cabernet dominant blend was just the best.
65% Cab, 25% Merlot, and 10% Cab Franc. There's a classic Medoc, classic Lafite, Latour, Mouton, classic blend that you see it a lot, and it seemed to really fit right there. And of course, if you have equal parts Cabernet and Merlot, and you decide to use a wine that's Cabernet dominant, you have a lot of Merlot left over. We put that together, and that was the D2. The first one, obviously, was the Cellars Estate.
So D2 became Merlot dominant with some Cabernet in it. After that, we never looked back.
We had the ability to have four of us all take on kind of a channel of the business. Obviously, Chris, being the winemaker, was in charge of the winemaking and that grape sourcing and that side of the business. Jay, being a wine broker, was kind of the salesman and knew all of the wine shops and all of the restaurants.
Initially, we sold all the wine through my brokerage business. We didn't make very much wine. We made 2 wines and 1,200 cases. So it was really easy. I was selling tens of thousands of cases in my territory. So going out to sell 1,200 cases was really easy. And I really went out and called on all the accounts, everybody that I was already doing business with.
So we had that automatic addition with Jay there to do that. I think I was maybe kind of the glue that kind of it kept everybody moving together. I'm kind of more of a sales and promotional kind of guy.
Gregory brought immense creativity and connections. He had a lot of connections via the insurance business.
And so that was kind of more my side of it, even though the first few years you have nothing to sell because it's all in barrel, but you got a story to sell. And the one, I think, real advantage that DeLille had when we started compared to today is, in 1992, I think there was us and maybe one other winery that started that year. There was only, again, 3 wineries here in Woodinville.
There was a real deficit of wine at that time. There was just only a handful of wineries. People were really interested in what was going on. The market was really responsive.
So it was easy to, get the attention of anybody that wanted to talk about wine. We had a story, and it wasn't diluted by 20 other stories, like 20 other new wineries starting that year. It was a very unique place to be.
And we bottled the wine with the help of friends and family and a couple people that had heard about what we were doing and just wanted to be involved.
We always thought the project was worthy. Once we released it, we tasted the wines, we tasted them against other wines. It was just self-evident that the wines were really good. They were achieving what I wanted them to achieve.
We didn't cut any corners. We always said we were uncompromising about effort and the quality of what we were going to produce. Sure enough, Robert Parker Jr. in the Wine Advocate gave our very first vintage 92 plus.
It was really gratifying and I thought amazing that we were getting this media attention and these kind of write-ups.
To get a score from Parker was just, okay, that's what we're doing is heading in the right direction. There's no question about it.
For me, being kind of new to the industry, it was kind of I was just a little starstruck by it all, I think, that all this stuff was being focused on us and what we were doing and that was actually really working.
That was kind of unheard of for a brand new winery and for their very first wine. And with that kind of validation, we went out just as proud as could be, confident we could tell anyone what we were doing was real.
It's really a tribute to Washington State and the fruit. There's something really special here.
Our original goal in my business plan was that it was all based on within 3 years getting to about 2,000 cases, and that's where we would stay. And I remember telling Marty Clubb of Lacole, we're never going to grow past like 2,000 cases, and he just looked at me and kind of laughed. And he goes, you just wait. Our goal was to get to, was going to be just Chaleur and D2.
Dad's goal was never to grow. He had a certain vision for the size, and he always assumed we could contain that size in this building. That was a very important thing for him. But it became very apparent that wasn't going to work.
I think somewhere between Chaleur Estate Blanc and Doyen, it became evident we were going to go past 2,000 cases.
Well, the Chaleur Blanc, yeah, that's been an incredible project. First of all and foremost, I didn't want to make it Chardonnay. I really thought at that time that the world was, as Jay put it, overblessed with Chardonnay. First of all and foremost, people were saying, what's a white Bordeaux?
We were going to make white wine for the first time, and the partnership agreed that Chris and I should go to Bordeaux and make sure we were on the right track with our reds, which we thought we were, but going there to ask a lot of questions was valid. And then see if we could glean anything about making a white Bordeaux. Now, David and Chris had discussed, I don't like to use the word recipe, but it was really a procedure. We had lots of amazing appointments. David set us up at Chateau Margaux and Chateau Aubryon. Chris asked a lot of questions. Come to find out, there were some new things that he and David hadn't discussed. It was an enlightening trip because we learned we were on the right track for reds, but we also learned a few new things as well. I bought a postcard at Chateau Aubryon. I wrote these postcards and mailed them while we were in, I think when we were in Paris, and mailed one to Charles. And simply it was, wouldn't it be great if we built a chateau like this in Woodinville someday? And miss you guys and can't wait to get home and tell you, what we've seen. And you know the story when we got back. Charles slid that across the table to me, and I said, yes, the card I sent you. And he said, turn it over. And I turned it over, and there was a vertical line right down the middle of Chateau Aubryon, which has 2 towers. And that was the remodel. He said, that's what I gave my architect because I can't afford to do the whole thing.
Well, they certainly all 4 had vision and a lot of talent in their respective areas. My dad was he was the financial backing, the financial start for it, and had visions and a dream to make this what it is, the chateau what it is today.
Which became our original home, which is the Lille Properties chateau down the road.
It's certainly not a castle or anything like that in Europe, not at all, but more of an estate, European hillside home, and that's what he wanted to recreate. I always believed in it because my dad did, and if he believed in something in the business realm, it was a pretty safe bet it was going to be good, and it brought him so much joy. I never doubted it at all. And then you've got the incredible talent of Chris. I mean, the wine, we were just knocking it out of the park year after year.
With that confidence, we ended up sending wine to the Wine Spectator. Then we brought in Stephen Tanser's International Wine Review, and consistently the scores were always in the 90s.
To be able to do what we've done is just a testimony to the fact that it was there to begin with. It's been there since the Missoula floods, 10,000 years ago.
We realized that great wines from anywhere in the world, great world-class wines, came from mature vineyards.
The quantum leap was in the vineyards, and the reason for that is if you want to change something in the cellar, you can do it that year. But vineyards don't work that way. Vineyards, once you plant them, it takes 3 years to get grapes, and then after that, it takes a number of years to tweak it.
You only get 1 shot a year. It's DeLille's 30th year. So we've had 30 tries making wine. If you're a chef at a restaurant, you cook the same dish 30 times in a night. You could technically perfect it much quicker. With a winery, you get 1 shot a year to do this, and that starts with, the fruit.
We realized there was something about Red Mountain. Now, Red Willow was a great Yakima Valley vineyard, and it's still one of the best. But Red Mountain really shined.
Between Ciel de Cheval and Clipson, 2 of the most prominent vineyards. We just developed some great relationships there with Jim Holmes and the Gellises at Clipson. Jim came to us originally and just said, look, I've got these 2 20-acre plots here. I'd love to see you guys take those on as your own. Chris really spent a lot of time, David Abreu down in Napa, some of the really other top vineyard people, around the world, and talking to them about how to do things.
It was just an excellent piece of property, and we were very fortunate to get it.
We were really one of the first ones on Red Mountain to plant our rows in the direction we did, where it was like 2/3 morning sun, 1/3 afternoon sun to get more even ripening.
And we all helped plant. I loaded up my blue Suburban with all the kids and all the shovels, and we all went over, the whole family, everybody drove over there.
Utilizing all different types of techniques, all different types of clones, and every trellis systems, everything else, to the point where we're really doing some fine tuning and some outstanding things here in Washington State that makes us the Grand Cru wine growing region that we are.
I was building a vertical over the years, Chaleur Estate, 1992, that was the first one. And then when Dad passed, I said to Gregory, I'm going to break that vertical for his memorial that we had up where his ashes are under the cedar tree.
His legacy will be 2 things. One, it'll always be the chateau, it'll always be the building here.
There's a large slate that has a hole drilled in it. And Papa always said, when I die, I want to be up there where I can look over the property, and please come up and always share a glass of wine with me.
For being the let's call it the money behind DeLille, he was a very unpretentious person and very likable.
We opened that bottle and we all said something about Dad and poured the wine down the rest of it down the hole. And
he was a larger than life figure to a lot of people, but in a very, very gentle and very kind way.
Gregory and I are brother and sister, but we ended up, the 4 of us, kind of being like just, the sister and 3 brothers. I mean, we'd get along, but then we'd also fight about stuff. I mean, it was just like a stinking family after a while.
We made for a very interesting group, and we all had a very common goal.
We knew we wanted to grow, but we couldn't grow out of our own hip pocket anymore. The guys all came up with the idea to look for a partner, and that's when Bacchus came in.
In 2010, I joined Bacchus Capital, a wine-focused private equity firm that invested in the U.S. wine space, led mostly by Sam Brofman. The Brofman family, of course, founded Seagram, the large liquor empire. After Seagram was sold, Sam wanted to get back into the wine space and decided to launch a private equity firm to help small brands grow. I think early on you could tell that DeLille was really special. The passion and the quality of the winemaking was pretty phenomenal and really, unrivaled.
Greg, Chris, and Jay, with the help of Charles, created an environment that allowed other people to benefit from the experiences and the things that they had learned along the way. There's a number of fabulous wineries and winemakers out there now that were part of the DeLille team at some point in their career.
We talk about the guys that used to work for us here that are all head winemakers and owners of wineries now.
There's a lot of touch points throughout the state that are because of DeLille Cellars and what Greg, Chris, and Jay started.
The founders were super ambitious. They didn't approach this project like anything other than they were going to make world-class wine. Blown away by the audacity of just, oh yeah, we're just going to do this. They really went for it and they were successful.
I think everybody involved with DeLille should be very proud of their part. And then enter Jason, who is now taken over as head winemaker.
Jason, gosh, Jason's got so much passion about this brand, about the wines that he makes, and that comes through in everything that he does.
Again, a philosophy that Chris always talked about was let's do things purposefully.
He's so hardworking and wants to do nothing 100%. He always goes above and beyond, and allowed us to grow by how meticulous he is in what he does.
It's been a great creative outlet as we've grown. Maybe prior to my time, but certainly when we went to grow in 2013 was when I say D2 graduated. That was the big change. This was no longer a second wine, and I didn't like how we talked about it as a second wine. And I want to be apologetic about Washington Merlot. It's probably the wine I knew most when I got here, and it was what we were looking to grow with.
Washington is this amazing place, and I don't think people realize it. I think the reality is there's not a lot of people that have experienced the Washington wine.
When Bacchus came on board, that helped us grow, gave us the capital to be able to grow that we were so desperately looking to do and just couldn't.
Bacchus's involvement in DeLille was really more about showcasing the quality of Washington wine to U.S. consumers outside Washington.
There was never any discussion about, hey, we want more and spend less money doing it. You have to cut your costs on your grapes, don't buy as many barrels. There was never any of those conversations. The number one priority for DeLille is to make the best wine that we can.
We had this amazing home that our founder, Charles, helped build, and was of course the first site of winemaking and continued as a place where we did events. But given the size and honestly the success of DeLille, we hadn't made wine there for years. And I think to be a world-class winery, as our winemaker says, from grape to glass, we want to be able to show people what we're doing and provide amazing experiences. Red Hook provided this amazing opportunity to bring everybody together. We repurposed the brewery as a winery. We were able to level their tank farm and create a 3-story tasting room. And then ultimately, the old Forecasters Pub became our restaurant.
To be able to have that whole piece of bringing it all together, the good food with the good wine, which quite frankly was one of my dad's big things, why he wanted to make good wine. It wasn't just to make good wine to sell to the world to make money. No, it was also to fill your table with family and friends with really good food and really good wine.
It was like, if you build it, they will come. It just proved the point that people wanted access to our wines and wanted to be enjoying their time with us.
And with the repurposing of Red Hook Brewery, I think we're helping to cement this as a great location and a wine destination.
I had no business thinking that I could do what we've done here at DeLille. The whole new winery and the restaurant and all that is just well beyond any expectations on my part anyway.
I think Dad would be shocked. Dad was looking at, okay, I've got this much money to do this much, and he never ever expected it. Again, oh, my son and his 2 young friends, they're, okay, we'll see how this goes. I don't think he ever realized the potential that those 3 had.
I think all 3 of them in different ways were incredibly passionate about Washington wine and about the brand of DeLille, and committed to both excellence and continuous improvement, which are values that remain with the company today.
You know, we're certainly not the only ones that are doing very cool things here. We're just a part of this really cool industry of Washington State wine that's just been an industry of discovery.
We all feel very passionate about this company, about this brand, and want to constantly achieve and do better. We've got a great history to build on, and hopefully that will take us into the next 30 years and hopefully beyond.